Greetings to one and all from the Holy Land, Holy Apple. We are on the 24th day of the second month of the year. It's called ER. Don't get mixed up with February 5778. Today, with God's help, you're going to need a couple of seat belts. The title of today's class is, what type of skullcap does your Messiah wear? What type of kippah, yarmulke, skullcap does your Messiah wear? We're going to be talking today, with God's help, about the time after the destruction of the Second Temple. Talking about Second Temple was destroyed in the year 70 CE, after the Common Era. And we're going to talk about the revolt of the Jewish people led by the famous Bar KOchva, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Kosiba. So let's take it from the beginning. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yohai, he was with us last week on the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer period. Everybody, there were about 500,000 Jews that went up to the holy city up north in Miron, close to Safed, and celebrated there. It was unbelievable. I was able to get up there for the closing of the ceremonies. It's an amazing experience. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was the top student of Rabbi Akiva, he says in the name of his rabbi, Rabbi Akiva, he says the following verse. This verse is in Numbers 24:17. I guess maybe today's the 24th of ER. It's special for the, we hit it right on the nose here. It says the following: a star has issued from Jacob, and a scepter bearer has risen from Israel. And he shall pierce the nobles of Moab and undermine the children of Seth. Edom shall be a conquest, and Seir shall be the conquest of his enemies, and Israel will attain success. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, what is this verse talking about? And he says the verse is talking about an amazing thing. A star. Who is the star? Who is the savior here? Who will destroy the nations of Edom, the nations of Moab, the children of Seth? None other than the Bar KOchva. He will be, according to this teaching of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in the name of his rabbi, Rabbi Akiva. This verse, which is a prophecy, this verse, as we know, there are no prophets like Moses within the Jewish people, but there was a prophet in the nations that was similar to Moses, and that was Bilam. And we're talking about now this prophecy. He sees in the future, he sees into the future that there will be some kind of star that will come into the world and be assistance for the Jewish people and to conquer all the foes and enemies of the Jewish people. And this, according to Rabbi Akiva, was none other than the revolutionary Bar KOchva. Okay, so let's get a little bit of a handle on the time period. We're talking about the period of the Second Temple, and there were 3 revolts. It's pretty amazing. There were 3 revolts against the Romans during this later period of Second Temple history. We'll go over the three revolutions. The first revolution was between the years 63 and 73 after the Common Era. And in the middle of this war between the Jewish people and the Romans, who were trying to destroy the temple and destroy the Jewish people, in the year 70, the second temple was destroyed. So that was the first war. Second war took place approximately 47 years later, in the year 110 CE. This was a revolution that was headed by two Jews, two special righteous people. They had names, not Jewish names, they had actually Greek names, Pappus and Lonius. And they led a second revolution 47 years later in order to try to rebuild the temple and also to try to reconquer the land of Israel. Their headquarters, Pappus and Lonius, their headquarters were in the city near the coast of Lod. Today when you come into Israel to the airport, so it's in the city called Lod, next to Ramle, near the ocean. And that's where their headquarters, that was their commanding controls were. Therefore, when that second revolution, when it did not succeed, the Romans destroyed and killed all the Jews in the city of Lod. Now this is brought down. Most those that are familiar with the Talmud, they should recognize these two names, because it says in the Talmud that nobody, no matter how great you are, no matter how spiritual you are, no matter how holy, we can never stand in the spot. It's such a holy place where Pappus and Lonius, that gave their lives for the Jewish people, it's such a holy place that none of us could come close to such holiness and spirituality. So these were the two leaders of the second revolution. The last revolution took place in the year 135. So we're talking about 65 years after the destruction of the second temple. Jewish life continued in the area of Judea, Yehuda, and especially in the city of Beitar. Beitar was a spiritual, unbelievable spiritual center. There are many sources which tell us how many synagogues, how many learning halls, how many children, how many people. It was a tremendous metropolitan area. And this last revolution, it was lost in the year 135. The city, on the 9th day of the month of Av, the city of Beitar was destroyed, and the inhabitants, an amazing amount, we're talking about 800,000 Jews were murdered in this third revolution. So that we're talking, that's our timetable, so we know where we are in the line of history. Now, we have to understand first, who was this guy, Bar KOchva, Shimon Kosiba? Who was he? What were his special traits? How was he able to pull in not only the Jewish people, he was able to pull in the leaders, the sages of the generation, which is an amazing thing. Because if we think about the first revolution against the Romans, year 63 to 73, we know that there was much criticism by the sages against the fighters to free Jerusalem and free the land of Israel. There was a lot of criticism. There were a lot of rabbis that came out against them. So all of a sudden, 60 years go by, and we see a tremendous support system behind Bar KOchva. So let's look up sources to understand who this charismatic figure was. Number one, he was a tremendous warrior and fighter, and he just was like one of these hero types. I'm reading from the history writings of Rabbi Bar Y of Jerusalem. So listen to what he says. He was a person of tremendous physical strength. He was able to uproot a tree while riding a horse. Now once again, these are not the words of Rabbi Y, these are from our sources. The sources, you could look them up. We're talking about the Eicha Rabbah on chapter 2, paragraph 4. We're talking about the Jerusalem Talmud, the Tractate of Fasting, Ta'aniyot, 4th chapter, 5th law. If you look into these sources which I mentioned, you'll see all these details that that Rabbi Y is reminding us of such. He was not only able to uproot trees, he was able, with his hands, he was able to hold back a Roman catapult. The Romans would shoot out various, kind of like cannons, I guess one might say, even though in their times wasn't exactly cannons, but they would have these sort of cannons that would shoot out rocks. And it says about Bar KOchva that he was able to catch the rocks and he would throw them back. Sometimes you look at the news out of Israel, you see that the army will shoot a gas canister at the Arabs who are rioting, and the Arabs will take that canister and they'll throw it right back at the army, and the army's like running off over there. His feats of personal valor were legendary, which all lent to a superhuman aura about him. The Talmud says that anyone who wanted to join Bar KOchva's army had to be willing to cut off their little finger. Pretty wild. And once again, we're not talking about a surgery. I'm not going to get into the gory details. We don't want to, maybe some people just ate right now. You don't want to, throw it up. So I won't get into the details how they would do that. But he had 200,000 soldiers who were missing a finger. And we're not going to get in exactly how that finger was lost. Anyways, after consultation with rabbis, which we'll get into later, he resorted to a different test. This was the test of, can you uproot a tree? We don't need those chainsaws, baby. We don't need, all this modern technology. We'll just take it, boom, right out of the ground. This is amazing. So the Talmud says, and the Eicha Rabbah says, that he had 400,000 men in his army. 200,000 were missing the small finger, the pinky, and there were 200,000 other men who were tremendous warriors who were able to uproot trees. Now, first of all, this is really amazing. I mean, these guys must have been eating their Wheaties, or I don't know if it was cornflakes or Cheerios. I'm not really exactly sure. But they were doing a lot of things right. They're probably staying away from the foods that we have today in our times, the GMOs and all this sprays. But this is really funny. You don't imagine